Hi, how's everybody doing today? This is Rich here on behalf of Rich TV Live with our very special guest. It's John Arbuthnot, the CEO of Delta 9 Cannabis. How you doing today, John?
Well, Rich, thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. You've been a longtime guest on the show, and it's been a crazy year. Obviously, COVID-19 is all over the headlines. It's on everybody's minds. It's affected the whole world. And you guys have just come up with some huge news, like really big news. The title of the news is pretty impressive. Delta 9 develops proprietary decontamination technology to help fight COVID-19 pandemic. So this is pretty big news, and you're the first company, I believe, in the cannabis space that I can think of that is now getting into COVID-19. Um, what can you tell me about the D pods?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess for us, this is kind of an offshoot of our B2B business where, effectively we're manufacturing, selling cannabis equipment. We're selling our proprietary growing platform that we call the Grow Pod, which, I mean, to remind any listeners, is effectively a retrofitted shipping container with customized wall panels, electrical, lighting systems, HVAC, security, all of those components. And used for cannabis cultivation or processing activities. We use the grow pods obviously in our own facilities here in Winnipeg in our cultivation business, and as well supply those pods to facilities across North America. Really, this is a little bit of a retool of our manufacturing line for the grow pods. In, I would say, midsummer, we started R&D on what we felt would be a retrofitted shipping container area, incorporating a few different decontamination technologies. So the decontamination pod is effectively taking a shipping container, creating a decontamination area and an operations area within that shipping container, installing a combination of heat technology, air circulation technology, and UVC lighting. And the real thesis behind the technology was if we can reach a certain amount of heat, a certain amount of UVC penetration within that area, we can effectively decontaminate the area for things like human pathogens, the COVID-19 virus, pests, and things like that. So research and development occurred over the summer. We did create the first unit by late summer, several different iterations of third-party lab testing, validating the heat mapping within the container, the UVC light penetration, that we were able to maintain certain temperature thresholds for a certain period of time. And we now have the lab validation results back and in hand, and it confirms that this unit is capable of decontaminating that decontamination chamber and should be effective then to kill COVID-19.
Wow. And how did you come up with the idea of the D pods?
It was leveraging a study that was done here in the province of Manitoba, which, effectively confirmed that if PPE like an N95 mask were decontaminated, so essentially taken to a certain temperature threshold for a certain time, would that kill COVID-19 and would that piece of PPE be reusable? And the study confirmed that it in fact would be reusable anywhere between 2 and 3 times before there may be call it a degradation in the integrity of, say, an N95 mask. So, the light bulb goes on and kind of, okay, can we do this in larger than a laboratory setting? And can we maybe put this into a shipping container? I think that kind of tiptoes us into the potential uses for the technology. I mean, beyond we know that it works now, what are the applications? So we really saw, obviously there were shortages of PPE. I think whether it be businesses, governments, care facilities, hospitals, all of these groups kind of struggling with decontamination or sanitation protocols, things like that for COVID-19. So we saw a real opportunity for a platform that would provide large scale decontamination, as in, again, within a large shipping container type area. So, the thought process was, again, whether it be hospitals, governments, care facilities, all of these groups requiring decontamination technology and new tools really in the toolkit for fighting COVID-19. And I think that's where the decontamination pod really fits in.
It's very interesting. How does this fit with the overall strategy of the company? Because this is like completely new direction for you guys.
Yeah, I don't want to say it's a complete pivot.
I'm not saying you're changing your business model, but it's not what we've talked about in the past. It's a completely new, potentially revenue stream for you guys. So
yeah, we really saw it as say a complementary add-on to our B2B segment. I think we haven't seen a whole lot of disruption in our cannabis wholesale business. We're continuing to make shipments across Canada. The wholesale segment is growing. Our retail stores continue to operate. There's been a general uptick in cannabis retail through this year. But the one segment that has been more uncertain is more of our infrastructure segment, where obviously business investment, overall business sentiment, capital spending, all of that takes a little bit more of a rocky path through this type of uncertainty and economic environment. So, through that, to be adding a new product line that's effectively leveraging our, keep in mind, we already have manufacturing facilities that take shipping containers and convert them into everything from our grow pods to laboratories to purpose-built areas for operations within cannabis facilities. This, seemed to be a little bit of an offshoot to that gives us another revenue stream, as you mentioned, puts us more into the, call it the COVID or healthcare space with this. But, we saw it as, we have the ability to create this technology, to validate it. We have all the tools, we have the facilities. This was kind of a simple retooling. And, we figured if we can even move the needle a little bit in terms of government response toward getting us through this pandemic, all the better.
Now, there's going to be shareholders that are going to see this video. How will this program benefit those shareholders?
Well, again, diversified revenue, really adding to top line is what we foresee being the benefit here. Adding to the bottom line, we feel this is a business segment that we can dive into quickly and profitably. If we anticipate margins to be anywhere similar to our existing B2B business, that has historically been above 50%, 50 to 55% gross margin in our infrastructure segment. To date, I think we can certainly maintain that. We're targeting an average selling price of $250,000 a unit. And, this is a piece of technology that we can sell not only in Canada, but all over North America, all over the world. We can really scale this up. Our facilities here have a current capacity to do between 16 and 20 of these D-pods per month. So at $250,000 a unit, there's a fair, potential economic impact of rolling out this new product line. So, now we start the sales process. We start to engage with governments at all levels, with First Nations, again, with healthcare, long-term care facilities, and really start to find where and how is this system going to work in a live setting. So, we'll take us the next few weeks and months to really roll out and get a good gauge on the market demand. But, again, I think from a shareholder value perspective, anytime we can add to our top line, can add to our bottom line, that's a good thing for shareholders.
Can you explain and describe how they work exactly and how they were built?
Yeah, so effectively, we take a standard 20-foot or 40-foot shipping container. We create a small operations area. So that's an area within that unit that actually has all the control panels and systems and cameras and things like that. And then the rest of the unit is the decontamination area. You would load in the PPE or medical equipment or office equipment or the targeted material to be decontaminated. You load that into the decontamination area, you turn the unit on. That mix of heat or the high temperatures and the UVC lighting effectively over an hour to 2 hour period will provide an assurance that up to 99.9999% of viruses or bacteria would be confirmed as decontaminated. So
wow.
The balance of that, you pull the material out, and again, you can be assured that the risk of potential contact with the COVID-19 virus has been hugely mitigated.
And how specifically will that help fight COVID-19? Because that's obviously on everybody's minds right now.
I think it's about giving governments and these different entities another tool in the tool belt. You think about return on investment, say for a hospital that is spending millions and millions of dollars a year now on PPE. If they can get even one or two additional uses out of their N95 masks without having to simply throw them in the garbage, there's a very quick return on investment for these hospitals and care facilities. In terms of fighting COVID-19, if this increases the availability of PPE, if this makes it easier for us to decontaminate material and decrease the chances of COVID-19 being transferred throughout the community or throughout these facilities, we're doing our parts in terms of mitigating the risk of spread of COVID-19. So I think it's kind of that trickle down effect that this could have in terms of fighting COVID. And, where we see this going from here, obviously, as we engage in these conversations with these governments and entities, there are things like visitation pods for long-term care facilities. There's things like vaccine storage is now kind of top of mind for a number of, how do we store these vaccines securely? How do we store them in an environment that maintains quality and potentially very low temperatures for things like the Pfizer vaccine? So, these are all things that we can manufacture in our facilities here. It's kind of that package of solutions that we will be offering to governments. And, I think we're fortunate as a business to be, one of those businesses that can fairly simply retool to provide these types of solutions to governments through COVID.
Wow, I'm really impressed. I'm kind of blown away by this. The revenue potential is crazy. 250,000 a unit. You can do 20 units a month. That's 5 million a month. I don't know if you have that many orders ready. I don't know if you want to talk about that, but man, if you could get it up to 20 orders a month, that's an extra 60 million a year. And if you guys are taking home 50%, an extra $30 million is going to help the company a lot. Now, obviously, you got to get the orders. You guys have any orders in place? You guys talking to anyone about purchasing any of these at this point? Can you talk about that at all?
There have been limited conversations prior to the announcement going out today. We are officially open for orders coming in as of today. So we would expect over the next few weeks, some of the initial interest prior to the announcement will be formalized. But again, now, we know the technology works. We know it's lab validated. The press release is out. So now it's time to get out there and sell these things.
That's great. I like it. I really like what you guys are doing here. What are the benefits of the D-Pods to the end customers?
Yeah, so, again, whether it's, a hospital and decontaminating PPE, think even a sports team being able to decontaminate materials that, may potentially transfer COVID between staff or players or things like that, or just, have that level of assurance, say in a bubble for sporting industry, that they can decontaminate large amounts of material and safely, whether it's, again, care facilities, being able to decontaminate areas that have been potentially exposed to COVID-19. Again, there's a lot of value, I think, to many of these organizations. And we've talked that return on investment for things like healthcare facilities and governments being able to potentially reuse PPE where they couldn't before. So, I think there's a number of different potential applications, also, I guess, potential for resale to companies that are doing decontamination services for other businesses to be getting them these units to be conducting those services on a pay-for basis. So I think there's a number of different applications here. We as a manufacturer will look to source those sales opportunities and, start initially with our home province and spreading out to the prairie provinces, the rest of Canada. But from there, again, there's an international opportunity to start rolling this out in the US or any other jurisdiction that's affected by this second wave. And, obviously we're seeing, case counts tick up here in Canada. I think, now is the time to get these types of tools out there and really smash the curve on this second wave.
I've seen a lot of companies really do similar things and pivot into lots of different fields. COVID-19 testing. There's one company called Control Energy that has a product called the BioCloud, and they test COVID-19 in the air. That's another client that I've been looking at very carefully. So there's a huge market for this right now. Obviously, you see what's going on in the United States. It's crazy. They're having like 2,000 deaths a day now and over 100,000 new cases a day. I think approaching close to 200,000 new cases a day. Like the numbers are just staggering. So where would you sell these D-Pods and who should buy them? I know you touched on it a little bit, but do you have a specific plan on how you were going to roll it out and who you're planning to sell them to and who would be the specific customer to buy them?
Yeah, so, a few different initial kind of plans of attack here. Firstly, we're in conversations with First Nations governments, at least in Manitoba here. Our First Nations are starting to get cases within their communities, obviously very concerning in many of these small communities where there's limited access to healthcare and those types of things. And again, getting them all the tools in the toolkit, working with central services and government, again, making this available kind of at the central government level and making them aware that again, these solutions exist. And then, from there, it's all to trickle down throughout the health system. And again, that's hospitals, that's long-term care facilities that we're seeing as kind of the epicenter of a number of these outbreaks, especially here in Manitoba, and I think through a number of other provinces. And, from there, I mean, we have, 50 US states, all of them experiencing varying stages, as you mentioned, in the second wave. And, again, to make this tool available to those most affected areas over the near future, I think becomes our first goal. But, again, from there, it's, the uncertainty, how long are we going to be living with this virus? Again, I mentioned sports teams and things like that. For any business trying to operate through this becomes a tool for decontamination for any of those necessities for your business. From there, as we work towards the solutions to this pandemic, things like vaccines, well, how do we transport those? How do we store them safely? How do we store them in a way, again, that maintains quality and temperature? We can provide those types of solutions. So, I think this is the first of what we would hope would be many announcements towards kind of this rollout and in more of the healthcare space for our B2B segment. And, again, for investors, I mean, this isn't a pivot away from selling grow pods. It's not a pivot away from cannabis wholesale or cannabis retail. All of those business segments continue to grow and expand for us on a year-over-year basis. But, again, this adds another now revenue stream and business model for us to begin to pursue through these alternative service deliveries.
I think it's very interesting what you guys are doing. Now, what happens if you guys start getting larger orders? How will you be able to handle that if they come from Canada, the United States, or internationally?
Yeah, so I mean, beyond being initially equipped for 16 to 20 of these a month, if things really start to ramp up, that's where we would look to partner with other industrial manufacturers, either here in Winnipeg or throughout Canada, throughout North America. We have worked with large manufacturers, both domestically and in the United States, on our grow pod business. So, the manufacturing side of this business can scale. The sales side, and again, working with our own sales force and working with third-party sales forces in the United States that we've worked with in the past. Again, all of that can scale. So, now we really take the temperature on the market demand, start to install these, again, initially in domestic markets, and really start to roll things up from there.
I'm really impressed with this, and I think this is going to really help take this company to the next level, because this is the number one topic in the world right now. And one of the issues, and I'm actually invested in Pfizer, and I really like what they've done with BioNTech, and potentially being the first as early as mid-December to get vaccines out. So with them having to be under like 80 degrees, or it's got to be really, really cold temperatures, right? So how will the D-pods be used to ship the vaccines in the future? And you mentioned it, like with the Pfizer, because it has to be at a certain temperature. This could be huge. Like especially if it catches on in the US for you guys, I mean, could be huge, because we're talking 300 million people. They're going to want like 100 million people vaccinated at least. They're going to need a place to store it all. A lot of people are talking about that being an issue. If you have the solution, this could be huge for Delta 9. How do you plan to use that to be used to ship the vaccines in the future?
Yeah, so we've already worked on a concept for the sub-zero storage requirements. A little bit different between the Moderna and the Pfizer. One is, call it sub-zero. The other was, I believe it's up to -70 or -80 from a storage requirement standpoint. So it does certainly pose some challenges. Really, I think in terms of our initial conversations with government, it's still pretty early in the planning phase how they are going to manage the storage and logistics behind the vaccine and distributing the vaccine. Becomes very difficult when you're talking those types of temperatures that need to be maintained, and ensuring that there's not only a first vaccine for people, but in the case of the Pfizer vaccine, and I believe the Moderna as well, it does require a first and a second dose being applied within a few weeks of the first. So you don't just give someone the first vaccine, you have to make sure you have the second one in storage waiting for that person to come 2 or 3 weeks later. That means, as you mentioned, storage capacity, even in Canada alone, needs to be in the tens of millions of vaccines, and kept under very strict, again, storage protocols. So it does certainly pose some challenges. And, in our conversations with these groups, I mean, really we zero in on, we can create modular storage units. We can incorporate sub-zero storage within those areas, and we can keep it secure. I mean, that's, something to think about as well, is there's going to be tens of millions of dollars in vaccines being stored at these central service distribution centers. So whether it's, working with every province individually, working with the federal government, working with logistics providers like ATS Healthcare, UPS, who have kind of rolled out their plans for sub-zero transportation of these things. Again, we're here to be a solutions provider as a manufacturer. But opening up these conversations with the D-Pod, with the decontamination technology, I think, kind of opens those doors and lets government know that, we're here to provide solutions. We're here to create jobs and continue to invest. And I think that's all the things that government needs right now in the through the economic fallout that we're going to experience from COVID.
Now, I've been following the COVID-19 very, very closely. I've interviewed a lot of companies that are in the COVID-19 space. You're the first cannabis-centric company that's now really, that I know of, that's really taking this leap. Congratulations, because you recognize there's a need, right? And there's a lot of cannabis companies that are doing extremely well right now that are really growing their sales. And as a whole, the industry in Canada has really grown this year, despite the fact we haven't seen necessarily huge upticks in the prices. Meanwhile, in the United States, we've seen huge growth in the cannabis stocks. Do you think that that's just mainly because they're about to legalize, and it looks as though they're going to legalize cannabis in America due to Joe Biden being, it looks as though, the new president? You think is that the catalyst why we're seeing that in America and not so much in Canada? Why the disconnect? Like we see like GTII, Trulieve, IIPR, Scott's Miracle-Gro, they've absolutely exploded this year. Planet 13, enormous growth this year. GRWG, Grow Generation Corp, huge growth. They've all exploded, and we haven't seen that in Canada, in the Canadian cannabis companies. Do you have an idea or opinion on why?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's really it's excitement around the U.S. election cycle. I think the market is kind of accurately pointing out that with a Biden administration, we're more likely to see over the near term benefits for the U.S. based MSOs and operators. Likely just in terms of nearer term liberalization of policies that have already been kind of in motion. So things like the Safe Banking Act, the MORE Act, a general relaxing of the federal stance towards cannabis at the state level, whether it be recreational or medical. I think that's really to the benefit of all of these current U.S. operators. I think the longer term outlook towards federal legalization also looks a lot better. As soon as we get to a point where the Toronto Stock Exchange can change its policies towards the ability of companies like us to actually operate in the U.S. and touch the plant, we will, and I think every Canadian cannabis company is starting to develop its U.S. plan. For us, it continues to be about the grow pods. So again, we've made deliveries of our grow pods into the U.S. It's our one business segment that we can actually operate in the U.S. We built out facilities in Michigan and Maine so far this calendar year, and we continue to kind of reach down and actually saw, as a result of the election, results from new states like Arizona and the Dakotas that have legalized or are legalizing more recently. So, I think we do have a modest amount of exposure to the U.S. over the nearer term. I think longer term, we've proven that we have a business model that works on the cultivation, the consumer manufactured products, the distribution side, as well as the retail side. So, we'll be ready to take that business model, put it down into the U.S. and these growth states, pending federal legalization. But, I think realistically, it probably takes a few years for that to start to happen. I think when the U.S. does look to legalize federally, they will take a good hard look north of the border at what we've done in Canada, because we are the first, as we know, G20 nation to be legalizing cannabis at a federal level. So, I think a lot of lessons to be learned from the Canadian rollout. And I think when things do happen in the U.S., they're going to happen very quickly. The amount of investment dollars to go into the U.S. market is going to be in the billions and billions of dollars, and the market opportunity there is in the billions and billions of dollars. So I think a great opportunity for all cannabis operators moving forward, but probably to be most immediately reflected in the share prices of the U.S. MSOs. But investors shouldn't forget that it's the Canadian companies that are, more regulated. They're more experienced at raising capital. They're operating in, I would say, a tougher market environment in Canada, and we're starting to see the winners emerge. So don't lose sight of the Canadian companies as well.
Absolutely. And since we've been doing these videos, we've seen your company just grow and grow and grow. And the last time you were on here, you had record revenue, you had record EBITDA. Everything was going in the right direction. Is everything still moving in the right direction with Delta 9 right now?
Yeah, so Q3 results came out a few weeks ago. Another quarter of record revenue, 13.1 million in top line. Took a bit of a step back on the gross margin. We had some one-time items, sale of bulk cannabis at a loss, which did affect the income statement. So the EBITDA was a loss of about 400,000. We are still EBITDA positive on the calendar year. So company is continuing to throw that towards the bottom line, on pace for a by far and away a record year for 2020 in terms of top line revenue. The company was charting for more than 50 million in top line revenue, up from 32 million last year. So
very impressive.
Expect the company to continue to produce positive results through the balance of the year. And I think we're very well positioned into 2021.
And how does that look for 2021? You guys feel like with everything that's happening that the sales would just continue to grow? Because I've seen these Canadian cannabis sales, seems like they're growing exponentially. Are you guys forecasting and projecting that continues to grow in that same pace? Does it continue to grow at a higher pace? Does it lose steam? What do you think?
From our side, we would project that there's going to be sustained growth for the next 2 to 3 years. We do feel that the Canadian market is going to, at a minimum, double from its current monthly sales volume in retail, more likely triple again over the next 2 to 3 years. Again, the pace of how quickly that happens, I think, will be largely dependent on how many retail stores are rolled out in markets like Ontario and Quebec toward reaching saturation. So that should continue to drive market demand. I think from our perspective, again, 2018, we did 7 million in top line. 2019, we did 32 million. This year, again, pacing for more than 50 million in top line revenue. My goal is over the next few years to see Delta 9 well north of 100 million in top line revenue and doing so profitably. And I think, again, in doing so, we will prove that we are one of the operators in the Canadian market that is really seeing success, that has built a sustainable business model, and that's poised for future growth in international markets. I think that's what investors should look forward to, is ultimately that global opportunity, whether it be U.S. market or otherwise. The world is legalizing cannabis here for medical and recreational purposes. I think all of that reasonably happens over the next 10 to 15 years as we start to see more G20 nations legalize at a federal level. And, companies that are poised to capture upside in that global expansion opportunity, I think, are very well positioned.
So I saw Aphria did an acquisition in America. And the first thing that came to my mind was they want a piece of America because they realize that all the American companies that are the MSOs are having a lot of excitement and a lot of growth. The stocks are exploding. People are investing in them. So the first thing that came to mind was they want a piece of America so they can get that American investment, so they can get some of that money in through the door. And I've seen that since they did that acquisition, the stock's going up. So you mentioned it a little bit. Is that going to be the way that the Canadian companies now are going to get to that next level? Are they going to have to do an acquisition in America to get that American interest, to get those American investors starting to buy the stock? Are they going to have some type of business in America? Are they going to have some type of relationship, LOIs, joint ventures with American companies? Do you think we're going to see a lot more of that? I think it probably will happen, because if you see a company like Aphria do what they did and then the stock starts to go up, then I think all the other companies like yourself sees that and says, maybe we acquire an American company here or there. We do an acquisition. Obviously, it has to make sense. You're not going to just acquire anybody. We saw what happened when companies did that a few years ago, and they've had these massive write-downs, right? So you want to make sure you do the right acquisition. But is that something you guys are targeting? Are you thinking, you know what, maybe we need to now? Because I know when we talked in the past, it was all Canada. But are you now kind of thinking in 2021 and beyond that maybe now is the time to dip your toes into America, to start getting those American investors, to start getting those American eyeballs, to really kind of take this undervalued story? Let's be honest, this is a very undervalued story, sitting at 60 cents, doing 50 million a year. I find it undervalued, underappreciated, underexposed at these levels. Do you think that that's maybe what it's going to take to take Delta 9 to the next level? Maybe dip your toes into America?
Yeah, so, it's interesting to see the Aphria acquisition, on I think the positive commentary is this was kind of establishing that base within the U.S. and buying, I'll say, a related consumer packaged goods or beverage alcohol company. The criticism is, is there enough overlap between the beverage alcohol and ultimately the cannabis business for that to really directly make sense from an investment standpoint? I guess that, really remains to be seen. Obviously painting the picture that Aphria is now ready to position themselves in the U.S. And, we see kind of strategies with, Canopy with the BioSteel and the Acreage deals, Kronos rolling out the CBD line of products. And I think, there's been kind of limited success across a number of those different approaches to, how do we get exposure in the U.S.? How do we plant our flag and get ready ultimately for federal legalization? For us, I think, again, that grow pod business becomes a little bit of a focus where, if I can build out facilities, 5, 10 facilities, 15 facilities over the next few years in the US, and then ultimately it becomes legalized. Well, those facilities become a pretty obvious acquisition target for us to go down and acquire cultivation and distribution assets and licenses in states that have already legalized, where there's already established production and distribution. Then we go plant our flag in terms of retail. We take that vertical integration model that's been successful here, we move it down into the United States. I think there's a good opportunity for consolidation within the Canadian space over the next 2-3 years. There's far too many companies. Acquisition of quality assets that are also undervalued, similar to ourselves. I think those types of acquisitions can be almost immediately accretive in terms of adding to top line and expanding, I'll say, the company's relevancy from a capital market standpoint, really building that critical mass, that market cap to a point where retail investors and institutional investors start to take more interest. All of that I think will build over time. But, the U.S. I think could be a critical catalyst for the space, not only for U.S. operators, but for Canadian operators as well. And I think it will be interesting to see whether this momentum really continues post-election cycle.
What is your current share structure right now?
Company right now has about 90 million shares outstanding, about 120 million on a fully diluted basis. Share price today around 60 cents a share gives us a market cap of just over 50 million. So, as you pointed to, we're currently trading a little above a 1 times annualized revenue. So, from a pure comp perspective, I think generally our small and mid-cap competitors are trading at between 1.5 and 2 times, and our largest competitors trading at between 2 and 4 times. So I think there's a good arbitrage opportunity for investors here. Just in the growth of the business, certainly should be some excitement around the COVID decontamination business rollout as well. I think there's a lot of upside, my personal opinion, from the current level of the stock.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And how does the balance sheet look right now?
Ended the last quarter with a little over 7 million in cash, about 25 million in working capital. Company has access to further credit facilities from Canadian Western Bank, our banking partner. So I think the balance sheet remains strong. The working capital position, cash position is strong. So company, I think, is well positioned to continue to execute and capitalize.
I'm really excited. I think you guys are going to have a huge 2021. If you can start getting sales of this product, which I'm sure you will. I don't think you'd be doing this for nothing. So obviously you can't talk of that and you can't speak on future forward-looking statements. But if we can start seeing some significant sales of these pods along with your core business, maybe you guys get closer to that 100 million next year.
Well, stay tuned for the next press release.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. Any idea of when that press release is coming?
No, that's a little bit too forward looking, but you will be the first to know.
I appreciate that. If there's anything that investors should know about Delta 9 Cannabis, John, before we say goodbye, what would it be?
I think we just encourage investors to take a second look at the company, do your due diligence, look into the most recent financial statements. Again, all of that's available on SEDAR. The numbers do speak for themselves. The growth story has been significant. The revenue ramp has been significant. We're very focused on execution and management of our core businesses. And I think when you value us versus our peer competitors, again, that's the real arbitrage opportunity for investors getting in around the current level is, as we start to trade more towards our peer competitors from a revenue multiple and earnings multiple standpoint, that's where the upside should be.
Thank you so much for your time today. John Arbuthnot, the CEO of Delta 9 Cannabis, symbol in Canada on the TSX exchange is DN, symbol in America on the OTCQX exchange is VRNDF. Thank you guys for watching. If you like this video, please smash the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you're not a subscriber. And John, have yourself a great day. If I don't see you, have a happy holidays and a Merry Christmas. And let's have a huge 2021. Guys, I think this company is extremely undervalued, underappreciated, underexposed. And that was before you got into the fight of COVID-19 and that pandemic. And I think this is huge. So I'm very excited to see the news roll out. And hopefully you get lots of sales and you can continue to help this fight against this global pandemic that has kind of shocked our entire world. And hopefully in 2021, we can get closer to some normalcy and Delta 9 can hopefully help us all get closer to that sooner rather than later.
Rich, thank you for having me.
Thank you, John. Thank you for watching, everybody. Have yourselves a nice day.